Who gives a brand? Basically, what is branding? What can it do for your business? Why should you care? So y'all probably know me already, but in case you don't, Alicia Nagel Creative, been doing branding, graphic design, and marketing for 15 years for over 100 brands. Started in 2008, and I'm in Kailua Kona and work with brands all over the nation. Branding is my obsession, and I love working with entrepreneurs and small businesses. So this is truly like my happy place, and I'm so excited to be here. First of all, who cares? Why should you care about branding? And it's not just me that wants you to care about it. Forbes magazine has said the right brand strategy, powerful and consistent depictions of your brand via marketing, is maybe more critical for your company's success than product design and quality. What? How can this be? Your brand is the single most important investment you can make in your business. Who's Steve Forbes? The guy who started Forbes Business Magazine. And in fact, not that long ago, he had Serena Williams on the cover, who said, Serena's new net game, I want to be the brand instead of being the face. Serena Williams. And then finally, Walter Landor. I'd like to introduce you to him. He's like one of my branding geek heroes. He said, products are made in the factory, but brands are created in the mind. So today we're going to talk about how to do that, how we can harness the power of this, and how you can put it together for your business. So first of all, sometimes it's easier to talk about what branding is not, in addition to what it is. So I'd like to dispel some branding myths for you. The first one is branding is just for big businesses or mainland businesses. Absolutely not. Oh, admitting somebody. People choose to do business with brands they connect with. As small businesses, people are not choosing to do business with us because we're the fastest or the cheapest or we're the monsters in the market. They're choosing to do business with us because they're connecting with our brand. Hawaii is a hotbed for entrepreneurship and businesses with rich stories and traditions. Business reputation is so important to win local clients and customers. So through branding, you can have a strong wild card to play to be assertive in competing with the largest mainstream brands. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sig Zane Designs. They make Aloha apparel. His son is inheriting the company and said it really succinctly that he meets a lot of companies locally that have brands, and he calls it branding gold. And these elements should absolutely be communicated to help you stand apart. Another myth I want to dispel is that branding is a luxury. Oh my gosh, you guys, branding can save you money. Even a little bit of it will have such an impact and make your efforts so much more effective, because branding helps you say the right thing in the right way to the right person at the right time. Anybody here familiar with the classic like sales funnel? It's a triangle shaped funnel where you try to like hit as many people as you can at the top, and then slowly they go down through the funnel. So, you blast out your marketing campaign to everybody known to mankind, and then you get some leads if you're lucky. And if you're lucky, some of those will turn into actual engagement opportunities and so forth, with the ultimate goal being your brand super fans at the end. Well, I like to say that branding comes in with a nice big old pair of scissors, and it cuts the wings off this. And what it does is, instead of blasting all of your effort, dollars, time at everybody, you can be more targeted about it so that you're able to retain more of the people you're targeting from the beginning. Because at the end of the day, everybody is not your customer. You just need to find those people who are the most likely to be interested and engage them directly. 80% of consumers are more likely to do business with a company that offers a personalized experience. So we're small, right? And we can't do that for everybody, but we can speak directly to our target audience. So what does this look like in action? Well, branding is going to tell a story, but not just any story. It's got to be your story. It has to be unique to you. And it has to be a story your customers care about. They do not want to hear about how I burned the brownies I made last night. That has nothing to do with branding. It's not a good story. A better story is I don't know how I branded the brownies or something like that. Something that has literally to do something with them and how I'm making them the hero. So literally, what does this look like in action? Here's an old typical advertisement I pulled of just people were frolicking in the sun. It looks old because it is old. I didn't want to pull any recent ones and make fun of them. But it's very generic, right? I mean, you can't even really see the people. They're painted. They're not even photographs. It's just kind of unmemorable, right? There's not, it's like you're the everyman that's being spoken to. On the other hand, an example of an ad that really paints a vivid picture and tells a story is this from Aulani. Oh my goodness, you're capturing a moment, right? That when you come into the lobby of the hotel and your vacation has started and you're like, this is amazing, this is happening. They don't even show the beach really very much at all. It's capturing the look on the people's faces. How about another example? Here's a very traditional real estate ad. Nothing wrong with it. It's nice to see who you're doing business with. However, it's not really capturing the emotions, and it's a little bit, unfortunately, easy to forget. So what would it look like if a realtor were to really tell that story and capture emotion? How about I love my Hawaii life? Isn't that why we live here and why we pay so much and put up with all of the craziness for these amazing moments that we live here? And so this person is speaking to that. There's not even like a building or anything in the picture, and her picture of herself is very small. Another local example for product packaging, Diamond Bakery. They've been around forever, bless their hearts, but there's not much of a story being told here as opposed to 1-ton chips. What is going on? I want to know, what is the background story? I'm like, you're never gonna mistake this for another brand. It's very clear that these guys have put a stake in the ground, and they're just like speaking to whoever. I personally don't want to eat a ton of chips, but I think if you had a really deep-seated hunger, maybe this would appeal to you. A few more branding myths that I think it's important to dispel. Your brand is not your logo. Says who? Not just me. Seth Godin, who many would consider the forefather of branding, the Harvard Business Review. Maybe the only person that would think your brand is your logo would be a cow who got branded, perhaps. But quite simply, your brand is not simply who you say you are. It's also your reputation, what you stand for, why you do what you do. And it's important that that is in alignment with what you're saying about yourself. If who you are and who people are perceiving you to be from a branding perspective are not in alignment, it's known as a brand gap. And our goal is to get those closer to each other, to either basically to walk the walk and make sure you're talking about things accurately. So I think a lot of times people think that branding is just like, oh, this is who I want to be, and so that's who I am. But you also have to make sure that you're communicating it accurately and that people are perceiving you as that in the marketplace. Being who you say you are is one of the most paramount things to build trust, right? With our friends, our family, but also our audience. And as Zig Ziglar puts it, if people like you, they will listen to you. But if they trust you, they'll do business with you. Branding is an excellent way to build that trust and to manage people's expectations, be consistent in your look and feel and what you say, and build that foundation of trust that's necessary to win clients, partners, customers. Another myth I'd like to dispel, which is like fantastic news for everybody, is that brands aren't created, they're discovered. Everybody in this room or in your individual rooms on Zoom has a brand right now. And the good news is you just need to uncover it. And then once you have it defined, we express it. Okay, so enough myth talking. What is this? How do we dig in? How do we get started? I like to break the branding process down into 3 main chunks. The first one I call archaeology, because we're digging deep. We're uncovering things that already exist. Archaeology is about digging around and finding an artifact and bringing it out into the light and examining why it's important. So that's phase 1. Phase 2, I call alchemy. After you have all these, wonderful elements that you've mined, these elements of your brand, our goal and purpose is to put them together to create gold. We want to distill and forge and combine until we have a unifying story that you can tell as part of your brand story. And then lastly, you apply it. So how do you use this to inspire your social media posts, maybe even your business name or your product name, your logo design, your website, all the things. So stage one is discovering your brand. I've been doing this for a long time. I just made my own branding process when I was first named brand storyteller at a multidisciplinary design firm in Los Angeles in 2006, and made this process, and I've honed it over the years. And ever since I started my business in 2008, it's evolved a little bit, but I'm a visual person, so I've made a graphic for it. Stage one of discovering your brand is company profile. Stage two is who else is on the playing field, your competitive environment. Stage three is identifying your target audience, which Arliss talked a lot about the other day. Stage four is defining your personality. And then lastly, the big idea is that alchemy stuff. And I have this for you, and I'll dig into it one at a time in our talk today. If you want to download this worksheet that outlines the whole process, you can scan the QR code here and it will walk you through it. And I'll give this to you again at the end. So first, let's look at the stage one, which is your company profile. I like to start with this because it's the easiest and all of this already exists. Hopefully you do have your growth goals and your reasons for starting the company. I'm going to dig in on a few things for each of these stages that might require more explanation. On this one, I feel like benefits is worth going into. Don't forget the intangible benefits. The obvious benefit is that someone gives money and they get your service or your product, and then they take it home and they use it. However, why did they get it? What is it satisfying in them? And so an example of an intangible benefit would be they have no buyer's remorse. Maybe what you produce is custom tailored and it brings them confidence. Maybe it's a haute couture high design item, and so it makes them feel like they're cutting edge. Or perhaps they feel good because they're supporting a local business. There's that warm, fuzzy feeling. So these are all benefits and things that motivate people to buy something outside of the obvious benefits, such as like health or like efficiency or it tastes good or whatever it is. So, and they can be compelling, absolutely, especially since, like I said earlier, we're small businesses and we're not Walmart. We're not competing on price, most likely. The next phase has to do with your competitive environment. So this is just the other people in the landscape, who else is in the playing field. And I want to encourage you to make sure that you don't go too broad or too small. If you are new to the market, if you're a market disruptor, if you're an innovative product that is solving something that with a product or service that didn't exist before, I would like to encourage you to resist the urge to say you have no competition. Because you know what? Before you existed, that problem still existed and people were doing something. Even if they chose to do nothing, that was a choice, and that is something that you're competing with. On the other hand, don't be intimidated and think that you're competing with everybody, because there are segments of the audience, the market, that you are more likely to be competing in. For example, this is a market positioning map. If you were a coffee company, there are probably only certain kinds of coffee that you're competing with. This can be helpful to help you break down any competitive landscape. Often up down, because it's the y-axis, is expensive to affordable, and then the left and right axis are anything that like matters to the customer, or like how do you want to slice this. It could be how easy and simple it is. It could be how professional it is. It could be how cool and cutting edge versus like simple and comforting. I just picked traditional and trendy. So if you are Folgers coffee, it's very likely that you are not competing with pea berry coffee, which is the beans. They're like an anomaly of the help me here. They're like a freak of nature. Instead of two lobes, they have one, and all of the flavor is concentrated into it, and they're very expensive, right? On the other hand, if you're Folgers, you're probably not competing with people who have decided to purchase a like a pour over, right? Folgers is all about being quick and fast. and cheap, right? Whereas pour overs, people have bothered to like go through the efforts of this. On the other hand, if you are Pete's Coffee, you're probably not competing with some hipster who has decided to grow coffee berries in his backyard and roast them. So what I'm getting at here is if you look at the people that are closest to you, you're more likely to just compete against them, and you'll spend your energy more focused, and you won't bother with trying to win customers who are just gonna end up buying an espresso machine anyways, or whatever it is. Another thing that it helps with is you have the opportunity to identify trends. For example, I had a client who she's in the women's healthcare space, and it didn't take me long to realize that all of her competitors were representing themselves with swooshy purple people. I mean, it was unbelievable. So it was very easy for us to be aware of that and to pivot so she stood apart. Another benefit for looking at your competition is I call it do's and don'ts. So if I did some work for Hawaii Island Adult Care, and we looked at other companies in the space of adult care daycare. And so you can see what are they doing pretty well that you would like to do on your own, in your own terms, in your own way. And then also, what are they doing that seems to have fallen flat on its face? What that does is it allows you to avoid their mistakes, right? And you can also see, by seeing what they're doing well, you can understand what is probably convincing to your audience, and you can make sure that you can compete on that level. But if you don't look at the competition, it's going to be very hard to stand out, right? To tell your unique story. As Marty Neumeier says, he's one of the forerunners of branding as well, when everybody zigs, zag. And you can't zag if you don't know where everyone else is going. All right, so next in the brand definition process is target audience. So most people are familiar with target audience. It's just a selection of the population who has shared characteristics that you've identified to be most likely to be interested in your product. Likely it's people who are already your customers, and you've noticed that there's certain segments of them. There might be a few, usually like 3 to 5 different types of target audience people that are making up all of your customers. So the thing I want to dig a little bit deeper on is a secondary audience. So for example, if you were a jewelry designer, your primary audiences might be a distributor, a large distributor like Nordstrom, maybe Maui Divers Jewelry locally, and the people who are purchasing your product and wearing it are most likely women if you make jewelry for women. However, when you communicate on behalf of your brand, it's really important that you consider a secondary audience, someone who might, for example, buy your jewelry as a gift for their significant other or their friend who is a female or their sister, or maybe even like a stylist who might be in a position to convince their customers to purchase your items. And the reason why it's good to mind them is, in this case, you want to make sure that your marketing messages aren't like alienating to maybe the opposite sex or people who might give this item as a gift. And on the converse side, if the stylist person, she represents an untapped market that could exponentially increase the amount of goods that you're selling, right? So she's not going to wear it herself, but she has a whole audience of people. And so if you remember both of these things, you're sure not to you just don't want to alienate them. You want to make sure that there's a seat for them at the party table as well. A really fun way of getting you to think about how to define your target audience is this amazing chart that Vanity Fair made. And it's just, I really like it because it playfully helps you see how everyone is, different generations are different, and your target audience is probably not everybody. It's got the different generations at the top, which this was a while ago, but it says iGen, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers. And they just have like really cheeky things. Let me see here. For example, the money draining addiction of each generation. For iGen, it's mobile game upgrades. For millennials, it's limited edition Nikes. For Gen X, it's superhero collectibles on eBay. For baby boomers, their money draining addiction is a second home. And for the greatest generation, it's the GOP fundraising emails. It's cheeky, but it helps you realize that the priorities of each of these audiences are different. So if you want a good laugh, here's a QR code to check it out. The other thing that defining your target audience does to help you be a more efficient seller of your product or service and authentically represent your brand is that it helps you anticipate the decision-making process of your client. And I'll show you in a minute why this is so powerful. The decision-making process typically follows a multi-stage, like maybe like 5 stages, I think they are. The first one would be awareness. Like, how do they first come to think that something like your product even exists, or they might be interested, or they might want it? Did their friend tell them about it? Did they Google it? Did they see it on a TV show? Understanding that can help you identify places that you might need to show up. Secondly, once they're aware of your product or service, they're going to look for more information. There's questions that they're going to ask about your product. And hopefully that you serve up the answers to these questions in your marketing materials. Next, because studies show that we make the decision to buy something with our heart, and then we use our brain to justify the decision, it's really important that you help them with the facts to justify their purchase. Next, it's great to understand what is the ultimate deciding factor. Like once they're looking at all the options, there's something that makes them grab your option or sign with you. That's a really important one to convince them on. However, you can't ignore the other ones or they'll never get to that point, right? And then lastly, they're going to take the desired action. They'll decide to buy. So this is really helpful, for example, if you're coming up with an email marketing campaign, if you're doing a talk like the one I'm giving, and you can walk them through the why they should care, and then the things that you should ask about it, and so on and so forth. If you're working on a website in particular, this is super valuable because you can make sure that you're answering the questions of your various audience members as they pop up. And in fact, if you want a step-by-step guide on questions to create a website content strategy, I wrote a blog article a while back, and it walks you through the whole process start to finish, especially if you want to evaluate your current website or you're working on a future one. This is going to be your friend. So next in the branding process is personality. That's one of the funner ones, right? And the personality of your brand influences things like your brand voice. How do you speak on behalf of your company? Are you lighthearted and cheerful? Are you reassuring? Are you conservative and sort of, maybe you're a bank, you know? Another one that I really think is powerful is the relationship with the audience. Are you a trusted friend? Are you a coach? Are you like more of a doctor type thing? Or like, are you a bestie? Are you fun? Are you a challenging person? Are you a sage? If you can define what that relationship is, immediately it's easy to write copy that sounds appropriate, because that relationship is going to dictate the language that you would use and the tone of voice. And I want to also dispel the myth that maybe you think your brand doesn't have a personality. It definitely does. And it's worth uncovering and infusing it into your product. I have an example for you. I have a vodka with very little personality, and then one that has tons of personality. Snore could be water, right? Like, I don't know. I guess there's a little flag. That's exciting, but there's not much there. On the other hand, what about ocean organic vodka? Oh man, the spirit of ocean organic vodka. Journey back in time with Hawaiian demigods to venture to the depths of the sea to discover the secrets behind ocean organic vodka's international award-winning spirit. I mean, does vodka really taste that difference from one to one? But I am captivated. The bottle looks like it's floating in the ocean. Ignore the fact that you can't stack it, and I'm sure the people who work in grocery stores hate them, but it's just so beautiful and fun, and what a great gift, right? I have another tool for you, a personality traits cheat sheet. Sometimes it's hard to come up with personality traits. But it's easy to see, like if you're going shopping, like maybe it's easier to shop and pick out a sweater than to like knit one yourself and create it from scratch. So here's a list of a bunch of personality traits. If you're interested, you can download it at this QR code. And the idea is you just sort of read through it and circle the things that you feel resonate with you. Then you don't have to come up with it on your own. I know that this seems like a lot. And you're not alone if you're thinking that. I've had some of my clients call me a brand therapist, but it's worth going into because the story, the why, it's a catalyst that makes people act. It's memorable. And it might seem like it's a lot of work to come up with it, but once you have it, what it does is it takes the work out of your customer, out of your audience to remember you because what you told them is a story that's entertaining and unique. Simon Sinek talks about how if you want to inspire leaders, how leaders can inspire people to take action is not by saying, here's what we're going to do, not by saying, here's how we're going to do it, by saying why. Why should you care? Why are we doing it? And I think the same thing pertains to branding. He's got a great TED Talk if you're curious. It's Simon Sinek, How Great Leaders Inspire Action, oldie but goodie. So once we've done all of this archaeology stuff, again, this is stuff that all exists already, right? It's time to do the alchemy. We're going to take it all and forge it down into branding gold. In other words, come up with a big idea. What is the core truth of the story? And ultimately, this is going to be not just a value proposition, but you're going to jump into the conversation that your customer is having in their head about whatever it is that you do sell, want them, whatever action you want them to take. And it's powerful because you're anticipating what they want, what they need, their motivations. I have some examples of this because it's a little bit hard to describe with words, but I think if I show you some examples, maybe it'll click. For example, say you have a billboard, right? In theory, you just want to put your value proposition up there. Like, come eat the best barbecue in Hawaii. Yum, delicious. Like maybe that's like the value proposition. We're delicious barbecue for some reason. And it's really important that you be short and sweet. However, I want to introduce you to something that Saul Bass said. He's one of the forefathers of like logo design and branding and stuff. And he encourages us to symbolize and summarize, but without a lot of words, right? So what does that look like if you were to make a logo? You guys recognize this logo? United Way. That's Saul Bass. He made that in the 70s. That was a while ago. How about this one? Girl Scout cookies, maybe? The Girl Scouts logo. He did that one too. How about this one? AT&T. I'm sure that they've had a few iterations since now, but these are all examples of how there's a rich story that's being told here through symbolism. He's summarizing the story. I didn't even put any words up there, but there's a connection being made and a whole background story that's connected to this. For a small business, it might look something like this. I had one of my clients, she's a doula. And she's like, oh, I really want the colors red and mint green. I love poppies. And I love, like, I think it's, I always get it mixed up. Avant-garde? No. Art Nouveau, I think. Art Deco. I can never remember which one it is. But she really liked this aesthetic, like the job ad to the left. And she was like, can you just make like a flower thing that looks like that? And of course I can, right? A graphic designer can totally do this, but gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we could infuse a story into it? So just on a very small level, I did the circle of life with poppies. So you have the bud that's just starting, the open flower, and the seed pod, and the concept of a circle. And so she gets what she wants, but there's also a story there as well. How about that billboard in terms of Nike? I mean, if they talked about what they do, they could say, we make sports equipment for the gutsy athlete. That's true. It's totally true. They could show pictures of people doing amazing things and say that, but Nike doesn't, of course, right? We all know this, just do it. They jump into your head. They're anticipating you, like the alarm goes off and you're like, I should go for a run. And you're like, oh, I don't want to go for a run, right? And you have this like back and forth with yourself. And so they do stuff like just do it. Or how about this billboard? Yesterday, you said tomorrow. Ooh, they know us, right? That's the power of branding. They're jumping into the like conversation in your head. So those are some examples of what it can look like. And I guess I do have more myths for you. I'm sorry, I can see the next slide, so I know it's ahead. I do want to encourage you to avoid thinking that you need to toss out your old brand, your old concept of who you are, your whole old logo, and just like wipe the slate clean. I like to say that rebranding is a myth because it already exists, right? That archaeology, you can't just ignore the past. I would encourage you to keep the story, keep some visual elements from your old brand expression, and build on that accrued brand equity. It's totally possible, almost no matter what you have. You can just spit polish it, shine it up. We can refresh it, but rebranding is not a good idea. Some examples of other companies who have brand refreshed over the years. John Deere, oh man, they've been around since 1876. If they can refresh and remain relevant, you can too. How about Starbucks? I kind of feel like we're just slowly zooming in closer and closer to her, and eventually one day it'll just be an eyeball. But the brand is consistent, the colors are there, and it's still recognizable. For some small businesses, I'll show you some stuff that I did. Hawaii Island Adult Care, this was their previous logo. And they were ready to lay dynamite. They didn't ever want to see it again. They were like, please make it go away. But we wanted to hopefully retain some aspect of it. So I took the lehua flower. And so we still have the green and red, but it's more of like a salmon magenta sort of a thing instead of a red, because red is not really a great hospital or like elder care color to associate with people. And it just feels a lot more modern. Another example is Big Island Commercial Properties. This was their old logo, and we still wanted to have the concept of different sizes of buildings and businesses on the horizon. And the owner is big into surfing, so he loved the idea of making it feel a little bit more surfy and cool. So I came up with this concept. So we still have the buildings on the horizon, but I feel like it could be Volcom or something in addition to it. Feels a lot younger. Another example is Lamb. Bless her heart, Aisha is obsessed with black and white and gold. And we wanted to downplay the ladies artisan market like whole name, but we still have to explain what LAM stands for. So we went with a more glamorous, like almost as if it's a lipstick written on a mirror, LAM, and just embrace that that's what it means. So ladies artisan market. So those are a few small business examples of how you can refresh a logo without completely getting rid of it. So once you've done your archaeology and you've got your story, got your alchemy, the next step is to define your brand. So the brand strategy is it's ideas, right? It's in your head, it's a concept, but like how can you take all that and codify it so you have something to reference for the future? Most people are familiar with the concept of a brand style guide. So usually this is associated with a logo, but it sets color palette. I like to say that it should have some analysis of your target audience in there, your competition, there's some competitive logos in here, the story behind it. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this over here is a story behind their logo. And then even their color palette should have a story behind it. There's another example of a color palette that has a story behind it. These are a Pacific Northwest brand, and could have just had the colors in there, but it's more rich if we can explain where they came from. Another tool that you can use to express your brand strategy and have it help you with what you're doing, I just call it a keyword map. So your business name would be in the middle and your core values would be in the boxes around it. And then if you go through the effort of coming up with vocabulary words that are synonyms of those core brand values, what you can do is have this and continually talk about your brand in the same way, but using like slightly different words. So if you're doing social media or your blog articles or something like that, it's a great tool to just when you feel like you're struggling for how do I say, I want to make sure my brand story is consistent, but I'm tired of using the same phrase. This can be really helpful. Another thing that's worth going through, and also Arliss talked about defining your customer and your target audience a lot in her talk the other day. It's worth developing a target audience profile. And the whole point is to be able to see this person so that you can have a conversation with them in your head, basically. Again, brand therapist didn't say I was normal. And I want to encourage you, don't be afraid to get creative. It doesn't have to be like a paragraph. I'm a visual person, so I really find it powerful to maybe do a collage or a cartoon. Maybe pretend like you're introducing this person as a character in a novel. What are they doing or wearing that makes you come to conclusions about this person? Or you could have fun and make them a fake Tinder profile. What would they say about themselves and who would they be looking for? Another way that you can avoid going too light or too heavy is I call it a target audience profile snapshot. And I made a worksheet for you if you wanted to do this. On the left are questions that have to do with demographics. So age range, gender, income level, description. And don't forget that these are their trends, their tendencies, they're the averages, right? So if your gender of your customer is truly split, that's fine. But if they tend to be more one versus the other, then it's worth noting that. It doesn't mean you're going to ignore the rest of your audiences or your secondary audiences. It just means that they're more likely to be this. And I specifically have the phrases on here like income level description. It matters a little bit less the exact number as opposed to a description of their income level. Are they like sitting pretty? Are they, budget conscious? Those things are going to be more helpful in terms of how you talk about your stuff than an actual income number. And then on the right-hand side, there's some more playful questions that help you imagine this person. I have most used apps, day off activities, brands they admire. Anyways, you could, if you want to download it, and there's a blog article as well that explains it, you can use this to develop a snapshot of your different audiences. Another tool that brand strategists use to record the brand strategy is a brand storytelling book. So this was the beginning of a private placement memorandum for a high-end sushi restaurant that I worked with in Los Angeles. They needed to get investors, but nothing existed yet. Usually when people invest in a restaurant, it's not because it's a money-making venture. Restaurants are not profitable usually, but people invest because it's really cool to say you're part owner and like we can go get like sake drinks at it. And so the private placement memorandum, which is the thing that talks about the plans and like legalese and numbers and stuff, we preceded it by telling an evocative story of what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, what materials, what's the ethos behind the chef's vision. And actually it worked pretty well. They got investors faster than they thought and ended up extending the engagement. And so I managed all of their build out materials. It was super fun, the menus and stuff. So anytime you need to, it's like basically an adult storytelling book. So once you have these things, maybe your target audience profile, maybe your snapshot, your guide, your keyword map, when you have these, suddenly you have a brand manager on staff 24/7. Once you've gone through the effort of like codifying this and defining it and putting it to paper, you can have like virtual meetings and you can invite your brand brief or book and you can invite your target audience. So it's a lot easier to have that discussion. You can watch your brand interacting with your audience. It makes it a lot easier to do things like social media. Suddenly you can tell your story a bunch of different ways. This is Puna Chocolate and their social posts. You can make decisions on your packaging. Guess who this is? That's their old bottle. Much better, huh? You can do things like more easily get press when you can tell a story. I handled the social and PR for Kona Brewers Festival this past year. You can earn customer loyalty and recognition. You guys know who this is, don't you? Honolulu Cookie Company. They go through the effort of making their cookies like pineapples. It works. They're adorable. And, how do you forget little tiny pineapple cookies? The whole goal here is to go from yawn to yes. That's what we're working on. We want you to be memorable. We want people to be big fans. How big? Well, that's a huge metal fan, but she's a metal fan too. And that's what we're looking for. We want people to connect with your brand. We want them to put the sticker of your company and your brand on their laptop. Talk about a commitment. Laptops are expensive. That's like a goal of mine. I want to be a sticker on someone's laptop. So I know it's a jungle out there, but you totally got this. Don't be intimidated. Even if you only do one of the steps that we talked about today, it's going to radically get you closer to being more effective and have higher ROI in all of your marketing materials. So you also know where to find me. And if you don't, here's that. You can hit me up and we can talk about how to continue defining your brand and what it might look like to apply it. So that's my Who Gives a Brand talk. And I'd love to open it up for questions if anybody has questions.
I have a question for you, Alicia. First, this was just so good. This is nice, meaty presentation. I really got some good thoughts about it, things I want to.
Thank you. Yay.
I like it. I guess I'm thinking of my own brand and then maybe some of the clients that I have where we have different audiences for different services. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of tricky to decide, do we have completely different brands for those things, or is there an umbrella brand and we just speak to one audience at a time? I get a little fuzzy sometimes as to the best way to go about something like that when we have different audiences and maybe different products or services under one umbrella.
Yeah, I mean, that's not surprising. So this, the target audience like snapshot worksheet, you should create one of these for each of your types of audiences. If you, what's your business again?
I'm a graphic designer, but
perfect. I can speak to that. No problem. Yeah. So, if you're like me, some of my clients are, individual entrepreneurs, and some of them are like agencies that might hire you to do graphic design, or even a small to medium business that they might even have like a whole marketing team, right? But maybe they need you for a particular need. I would say each of those have slightly different needs. But sometimes there's like an aspirational thing that happens, like the small entrepreneur person who might need graphic design stuff. If you speak to the bigger guys, you're going to get the smaller ones anyways, because they want to be the bigger guys, right? Mm-hmm. And right. In terms of marketing departments in an individual company versus an agency, which their billing is different, their needs are different. A lot of times marketing managers of an individual company want you to like have worked with company almost exactly like theirs before. So at least for me on my website, I have my clients, I make sure that they show different types of executed items. So like everything from like brand videos to larger campaigns to websites, because the agency wants to know like what you're capable of, whereas the marketing company, the marketing department in an existing company wants to know that you've worked with their industry before. And right. So I built a like a clients page that lists almost all the clients I've ever worked with, or I need to update it, but it's segmented by industry. So if you're like, I don't know, maybe you're a chocolate company that wants to know that I've worked with chocolate companies before or done food packaging, you could go to the client page and skip over right to that section and be like, oh, she has worked with a few companies. So yeah. Sometimes just figuring out how to like, what do they care about? And then answering those questions in whatever it is you're doing, your campaign or your website or something like that. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it's really helpful. I mean, it's helpful for me, and it's helpful, I mean, for some of the clients that I work with who do all the things for all the people, and it's really difficult sometimes to get them to narrow down their message and narrow down the who they're speaking to, because they don't want to exclude anybody, which you addressed earlier.
Yeah.
So a lot. Yeah, it's tricky, but
it is.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, good. Anybody else have ideas, thoughts, questions?
I really loved
Hopefully
your presentation.
Thank you.
It's a nice insight into everything that goes into branding. Yeah, it's really great. So
Yay, thank you. I'm so glad. I really love talking about this stuff, and I'm working on a do-it-yourself branding course so that people can be walked through with more hand-holding. I really zoomed through this. But I do think that all of us can benefit from it, especially small businesses. And I think it so often is perceived as something that only like big agencies or like huge companies can afford and put to work. So thank you for going on the journey with me. And I hope that you use some of the worksheets or, you know, do something, and I hope it's helpful.
Alicia, how long does it take for you to help brand somebody? And then once you're branded, of course, it's like a logo and color scheme for posting on social media and stuff, but does it have to go on a website, or is it like, what else, like from start to finish timeline? And then once you're branded, then what, I guess is the question.
Yeah. So when I start to work with a company, or even before they hire me, I tell them, I'm like, this is a promise and a warning. Everything I do is going to have a brand strategy foundation. I'm going to be asking you about like goals and like business stuff and just things that other graphic designers are probably maybe not going to ask you about. And here's why. It empowers me to like make recommendations for you that I am confident are going to help you get to where you need to be. And so if you want to make use of like my full experience, capacity, talent, whatever it is, like, please, you're going to have the patience for me to like go through this first. And the bare minimum of that is what I call a brand audit interview. Depending on how many people are on the decision-making team, it might be like a workshop or a meeting, or if we're being scrappy, and especially if it's just one person, maybe I'll put together a custom like questionnaire for them and they'll send me the answers back. And it's everything from stuff that's in the worksheet, this profile worksheet, to questions like, if your brand was a breed of dog, which dog would it be and why? And it matters less what they answer, but it's all about the why, right? And so I have developed these questions over the years to like basically trick business owners into talking about this stuff in ways that they haven't talked about it before. So then we have a meeting where I ask them follow-up questions on their answers. And sometimes that's all that I do for a business if it's a smaller engagement. If it's a website, for example, I definitely do the do's and don'ts. I look at their competition to see what they're doing well and what they're not doing very well. And then I'll do something that I call a mood board, where I take what they told me in the initial questions and I'm like, okay, well, what sort of like image or color or pattern or whatever it is similar to that. And I find that it's often a lot easier for people to see something that they don't want or they don't like than for them to communicate what their preferences are. And so the mood board, it's basically like a straw man for us to pick at, you know, and like, oh, you hate that? Why? Tell me more. Like the brand therapist, like, how does that purple make you feel? And it's more just tricking them into, you know, a lot of people who are executives or something, they've never thought about this stuff. They don't know why they like purple. They just like purple, you know, but the whole purpose is to get those nuggets, right? Those insights. And yeah, and then throughout the process, I'm usually like maybe highlighting or circling the adjectives that come up, and that becomes their brand personality. And so once you have those three things, I can start building a website after that. I mean, we talk about the content a little bit. If it's a bigger site, I shouldn't say right away. There's a bigger site, then I go through the decision-making process of the customers too, because it tells us what the pages should be, right? So if you're Deb Mellum as a graphic designer and you're designing the homepage and you know that your 3 audience segments are entrepreneurs, marketing firms who might hire you to do freelance stuff, or larger companies, then you make sure that the top questions of each of those audiences are addressed on your homepage, right? You have to address it right away. And it might be a picture instead of a word, but it starts to tell you what your website needs to be instead of you having to be like, what do I want on there? Nobody cares what you want on there. It's about your customer. We need to make sure that they're taken good care of. And so it tells us what the sitemap is and like what content you should have on each page. And so once I have that stuff, then I start building the website. And again, it sounds like a lot, but it dramatically reduces the amount of back and forth, the guesswork. I don't have to be in their head as much. And honestly, often I don't even have to show them like options because we've already looked at the colors and all that stuff. Makes me more efficient, saves them money, and everybody wins, hopefully. The idea.
Cool. That's interesting.
Thanks. Yeah, you asked about time, I guess. So it depends.
Oh yeah,
but like
start to finish. Like
yeah, I designed a one-page website and I went through that process in a month. It was fast,
Okay.
but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, ladies?
It was a fabulous presentation. And I
Aw.
remember one thing you said, like, you know, your website speaks behind your back to your clients. And that has haunted me. You can't imagine how much.
Sorry. Also, you're welcome.
No, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's something we have to, you know, get out there. But sometimes, I don't know if you've, you know, encountered this when you have someone who comes up with a logo, maybe it's, you know, horrible or whatever, but they have, you know, their heart on it somehow.
I know.
What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Oh, I learned that lesson early, and often people would love to come up to me at a networking event and be like, you do logos. What do you think of my logo? It's a trap. They don't want to know what you think of their logo. All they want to hear is that you think it looks great because they probably designed it themselves, you know?
Mhm.
And it's possible to have a logo that like maybe is not that sophisticated looking, but it's really effective. I call that like a hardworking logo. You know, it's like it's digging in there, it's like doing stuff, and it's communicating. It could be like maybe a little bit more refined, but it's getting the job done. And there's nothing wrong with that. And especially if you've started a business with that, do not get rid of it completely. Like you have to continue that story because you've built up, they call it brand equity, but all that like goodwill, all of the reputation based stuff that you've been doing so far with that like logo that's like pretty good, but maybe not as polished as it could be. It's worth something. You don't want people to think that your level of service is going to change and that you're somebody else, you know? So a good designer will maintain some aspects of it through whatever redesign they do. And it's worth, you know, if you're starting out a business, like I feel like if there's anything that you invest in, a logo is a really good one. It's because it's the face of your business and you don't want to like, it's your face. You don't want to like cheap out on a nose job, right? You're gonna have to look at that every day for the rest of your life. It's really hard to get rid of. You can have another plastic surgeon like clean it up a little bit, but guess what? The first one's not going anywhere. So if you have a really awesome logo that like captures your brand essence or whatever, you can have a really basic website. You could probably even like DIY website with like Google Sites or something. But if your logo looks like polished and slick, you can just use like pictures and write stuff. Whereas the other way around, it's a little harder. If you maybe, I don't know, Fiverr'd it or did do it yourself and maybe unfortunately it wasn't very successful. It's just harder to get away from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm unsure of. I'm going to do another talk. We'll see what it'll be on. Something
Okay.
marketing and branding related.